So I'll zoom into Phoenix, Arizona, and we can start any basic session of PVMapper the same way. We're going to start by looking for a good place to build a site and drawing one here on the map. I'll turn on our existing power infrastructure layer so that we can see where existing power lines and substations might be. Those tend to be pretty good first or naive guess as to a reasonable place to put a solar plant. Down here we can see we have a substation and a line connecting into that substation. So this will be a good place. I'll go ahead and click Add Site, and we'll see that we'll add our first site here, and we'll see how its scores stand up. I'll go ahead and name this site A. So now that we've added this site, we immediately see the main scoreboard pop up and all of its tools populate. The main scoreboard is the heart of PVMapper. On the left you see all of the score tools that we have. Site A is our only site, so you see its value out of all the tools as well as its score in a range from 0 to 100. The composite of all these scores is what gives us our average score, and of course the lowest score may be a limiting factor to development. For example, the gross area tool gives us a score of about a half square mile. The slope tool, 100% of the land is within our slope constraints of a 5% slope. We have tools for meteorology or solar resource. So this is direct normal irradiance. This is SUNY Buffalo data. We also have tilted flat plate irradiance. You can see that score is 100 because we get 6.45 kilowatt hours per square meter per day. Most of these tools have corresponding layers in the layer list, which you can turn on and off to help your investigation. Social acceptance tools. Dave was nice enough to introduce our 3-year social survey, and that data is accessible here. We see only 11% of respondents accepted the distance to agriculture, and you can see the reason why is because we've managed to build Site A right on top of a existing ag. It looks almost like there's a concentrating solar plant right next to us, but the existing solar proximity tool tells us that the nearest solar plant is 9.5 miles away. And if we zoom in here, we see that this is in fact a residential development that just happens to be a number of homes around a central tower. So moving along, we'll note that wetland proximity, the score for Site A, is rather low, and that's because it's built just 0.3 miles away from a river. The river the tool is found is this canal. Anyone who's familiar with Phoenix and urban Phoenix is well aware that the canals are not subject to conservation. And so I'll go ahead and lower the weight of the wetland proximity tool down to 1, because I as a developer know that, using my local knowledge, that this social acceptance tool is not well trimmed to Phoenix. So the real strength of the scoreboard is when it's comparing multiple sites. So I'll add a couple more sites, try to miss some farmland this time. This looks like a wide open spot. We'll call this Site B. And then we'll scroll, keep moving along these same power lines. And we have what looks to be an abandoned airfield up here. And I can add a third site. We'll call it Site C for consistency's sake. Of course, the exploratory nature of this tool is not to be underscored. The hope of providing all the layers in addition to using them as tools is that you can use your expert knowledge to locate a number of sites and then support them with evidence from the scoreboard. So we have our 3 sites here in the background. If I maximize our scoreboard, you can see all the sites compared side by side, and we can go down the tools. You immediately notice that the soil tool has pretty low scores. Site C does not have fine-grained soil survey information located near it, so it gets no score. Sites B and A both have a number of different soil types, all of which have a 2-star rating. This means that all these soil types are highly susceptible to erosion. So this may be significant for the development of all 3 sites. However, it's important to remember that this is not a helpful differentiator between these sites because all the scores are the same. Land administration is a differentiator. Site A has no overlapping land administration agency. Site B looks like it's built on some state trust land. And Site C looks like it's built on state trust land and a Department of Defense site. Right now, both of those are rated 4 stars, but we can open up the star rating tool and change those if we have our own opinions about the goodness or badness of any given administration agency. So State Land Board is rated as 4 stars. It may be that I have a friend on the State Land Board. I believe that's true. But I don't have any friends in the Department of Defense, and I consider it unlikely that we'll be able to develop there. If I set that to a 2-star rating, you can see immediately that the score for Site C has lowered. So I mentioned that all the layers are for these tools are present, so if we wanted to visually inspect the overlap of these land administration agencies, we can right-click to zoom into these individual sites. Zoom out just a smidge. And I can turn on the land administration layer, and you can see we've overlapped, it looks like a couple, as you'll recall. The Identify tool is helpful here. This green site is our DoD area. It looks like what we thought of as a defunct airfield is in fact an active training site, Rittenhouse training site. And this blue area is our Arizona State Land Department area, or State Land Board run area. So there's a wealth of information available in here that you, again, as an expert user and site locator, can leverage to your benefit. Now Site B was also overlapping some land. We can zoom into it. It's very possible that Site B only overlapped a corner of a land administration area, in which case we could resize it and get a better score. But in this instance, it does not look like the case. To resize it, we'd have to move it, and we'd have to move it over farmland. So you can see the interaction between the tools and the layers. There's a tight coupling. I've discussed the land administration layer. We can discuss the substation layers. As you recall, Site A was built quite close to, in fact 180 feet from, existing transmission. Site B is a little bit further away, and as is Site C, about 1,800 and 2,100 feet to the nearest lines, which are all 230 kV lines. That's a happy coincidence, but if your coincidence is not so happy, if the nearest line to you is a higher kV value in the 500 to 700 range, it may be the case that you want to restrict that. So in this configuration menu that some of the tools have, you're able to change some of these options. We can set the maximum voltage to 230 kV and restrict it to only associate with lines with a known kV value. You can see that the scores have not changed, but in any instance where you, again, ended up in that unhappy circumstance that your closest line was too high to tie into, that they would change. We can also change the utility score function. This function is used in every tool. This is what maps the score value, in this case a distance to a power line, to an actual score. So as the distance increases, you can see as I drag this around, the score increases up to a distance of 0, which gives you a score of 100. I can play with this transmission line if you have a specific business case that you can build out about 5 miles of line, and after that it will be cost prohibitive. We can give lines up to 5 miles a score down to 80, and then create a substantial cutoff after that point. We could put it at 0 here, or we could put it at 20, but I'll leave it at 20. So now you can see that any distance beyond our minimum here has met with that lowest score. Down here is a comment. This field is mostly for your benefit, and its contents will appear on reports that you generate. So we'll update this comment that helps explain why we chose this score value. Looks like 5.47 miles is the new cutoff that I've established. I'll hit OK, and we can see that our scores have updated. They haven't changed much because all 3 of these sites are quite close to that value. But I can go in and edit the utility function again, make the slope here much steeper. We'll say that after about 1 mile we want to score down to about 60. Again, I'll hit OK, and you can see that the scores have changed now. The sites B and C now have a significantly different score than Site A does based on distance to transmission lines.